What's up and welcome in. This is your Wednesday Locked On Syracuse podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube. Subscribe to the show there, like, comment, all that stuff. Great show on tap today, Tim. One of the best, an encyclopedia of
Hall of
Syracuse
Famer.
knowledge, a Hall of Famer of Syracuse knowledge, a Hall of Fame person as well. We're going to be joined by Mike Waters on today's show and tomorrow's show. Little two-parter for you here, talking all things the present state of Syracuse hoops, as well as what the future could look like. So today's episode, we're going to get into some stuff with Benny Williams, Frank Anselem, Jesse Edwards, just the development that we've seen out of some of these guys and what to look forward to down the road from them. So we're going to do that with Mike Waters coming up next.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is our treat to welcome in not just a Syracuse basketball writer anymore, the Hall of Fame Syracuse basketball writer, Mike Waters, an encyclopedia of Orange knowledge, joins the Locked On Syracuse podcast. First of all, Mike, we'll get into some of your career stuff as well on today's show, but congratulations on your Hall of Fame with the U.S. Basketball Writers Association, a well-deserved honor. Anyone that's ever come across you, your work, or anything of the sort knows that you are not just a Hall of Fame writer, you are a Hall of Fame person as well. So first, wanted to express our congratulations for that. But I'll let you brag here, okay? I want you to brag a little bit here.
I'm not bragging.
I know you're not, but I'm giving you the platform. You need to take your humble hat off for a second here. Who is the coolest person that reached out to you to congratulate you?
Oh, coolest?
You can say us too. I mean, I know we just
It's not
did it.
us.
We're a little late.
I saw Derek Coleman tweet at you, so you're automatically lying to us right out of the gate if you're saying it's us.
Derek, that was kind of funny when he did that, because Derek and I, we go back a ways. We have a little bit of a history together. I covered Derek back when he was a little meaner, surlier, but now he's a go teddy bear.
You softened him up over the years. That's what you did.
No, I didn't. A guy I covered early in my career when I started out in Nashville, Tennessee, right out of college. And I was covering some small college basketball, and Belmont, which is now Division I. Back then, Belmont was NAIA. And the coach then was the coach who was the coach up until about a year or two ago, Rick Byrd. And Rick Byrd obviously turned Belmont into just an amazing program at the Division I level. But back then, he was just a very young head coach. And it was neat because as a kid growing up in Knoxville, Tennessee, Rick Byrd's dad was named Ben Byrd, and he was the columnist for one of the Knoxville newspapers. And I remember the name of his column was Bird's Eye View, which was, the clever sort of names he gave to columns back then. And so there I was. I mean, I grew up reading Ben Byrd, and then my first job out of college, I'm covering his son and his son's basketball team. And Rick Byrd reached out to me. He saw it, and he still knows he knows my cousin down in Nashville, and my cousin had let him know. And so I heard from Rick, and that was pretty cool hearing from a guy who I last covered his team 35 years ago.
So did you get a phone call, or how does it work? Is it something that you knew?
You don't have David
coming?
Baker come around for you guys too, right? The NFL Hall of Fame guy who imposes his will on his inductions.
That would have been cool. That would have been great. But no, you get a phone call, and mine came from Shannon Ryan, a really longtime writer, and now she's an editor with The Athletic, but she's been in Philadelphia and Chicago, and she's the Basketball Writers Association president this year. And so she called me, and I actually thought she was calling me for another reason. I had reached out to her about a week or two earlier, offering my help, knowing that late in the season is when a lot of the duties get kind of big and they start weighing on you, and you don't have time for them, but that's when they happen. There's different committees and conference calls. And I had reached out to her saying, hey, listen, I remember what it was like when I was president of the organization. If you need anything, let me know. I'm happy to join a committee, if you need people. So yeah, when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I figured, Shannon is taking me up on my offer. Look what I just got myself into. She's going to put me on some sort of ad hoc committee. And then she just started talking about the Hall of Fame. And I thought, oh, she's putting me on the Hall of Fame committee. That's always fun. And then when it was finally getting clear to me what she was saying, that I was going to be part of this year's class. And I remember distinctly, I asked, I said, "Are you sure?" Because I still wasn't quite understanding why she was calling, and I didn't believe it. And, but it's a great honor, and I'm very humbled by it. And it's been a lot of fun hearing from a lot of people. That's been the best part so far is how many people I've heard from and people that have reached out, and, hearing from players I covered, coaches, former colleagues, former students. It's all been a lot of fun.
Well, certainly a well-deserved honor, and we appreciate you taking some time with us. Two of your former students, I believe. Were you a Mike Waters student as well, Tim?
Oh, of course. I one of my favorite classes at Syracuse.
It is.
I'm not just saying that because you're here, Mike.
It is one of the best classes because
when you get Brent Axe on your next, you'll be telling Brent Axe he was your favorite professor.
No. Occasionally, I go on with Stephen Fonte, and he was one of my old professors too. And I always bust his chops a little bit because he didn't give me a grade that I thought I deserved in that class. So I got the grade I deserved in Mike Waters' class. He is a fair and honest professor. But like everything, like between the people.
What we're learning is Tyler's loyalty can be bought by giving him a good grade. Apparently.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
No, I think you gave me a B. That's the thing is, and guess what? I think I deserved a B. Looking back at some of my work in that class, I think I got a deserved B in that class.
No way.
You weren't just handing out A's willy-nilly like that. If you go back and check
the records are within an arm's reach. I can get them. I think you're lying.
But no, just like the experience that you had in that class between bringing in some former players, like I know you brought Matt Rowan to my class, establishing the Florida State SID. Remind me, what is his name?
Chuck Walsh. He's one of the best in the business.
The best in the business. Like establishing that relationship. I know Drew Carter, who was in the class with me, he's now calling games with the ACC network. He sees Chuck Walsh like every other week. And he's sending us all this stuff, Chuck Walsh stuff. Like, look at these handwritten notes he gave me. Like, he is the best, one of the best. So just establishing that relationship as well. Always cool, and just learning some stuff. So certainly a fantastic class. For any Syracuse students that may be listening to this, you have to take Mike Waters sports writing class. It is a must if you are a Syracuse journalism student. So I do want to put that out there. Getting into
a classroom filled with faces next fall. That'll be fantastic.
Yep. So getting into the Syracuse team this season and sort of what's become of it. Obviously, not the season a lot of people expected this year. I think people had some higher aspirations. You're on the brink of potentially being a sub 500 team for the first time ever in Jim Boeheim's career. Certainly some time to change some of that, but are you surprised that this team is where they are right now?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess when you see it actually take place on the court, you're like, oh, well, now I get it. Before the season, I think I overestimated. I thought they would be a little bit better defensively, especially early on. They really struggled defensively in November, December. The losses to Colgate and Georgetown were all about defense. I knew they were lacking some athleticism compared to some past teams, but I thought with their size, Cole Swider being a lot taller than Alan Griffin, Jimmy Boeheim being a little taller than Quincy Guerrier, that they'd make up for some of the lack of athleticism with their size, their length, and just also their basketball IQ. And, Cole being a fourth-year player, Jimmy being a fifth-year guy. That wasn't the case. That didn't happen. That didn't play out the way I thought it might. And I don't think that's anybody's fault but my own. I missed on that. I overestimated that the height and length would be able to make up for it, because they just they don't get out the shooters the same way that the past iterations of the Syracuse team have. When you look at like some players like Buddy, Joe, Cole, Jimmy individually, they're all fine. They can play. But when you put 4 guys and all of them are a little lacking in terms of athleticism, then all of a sudden you're going to have some issues, right? Both we mentioned defense, but even on the offensive end, yeah, you've got a lot of great shooters, but you don't have anybody in the team who's a break down your defender guy, who's a blow by you sort of guy. I mean, when like Buddy gets into the lane and gets in there, he still hasn't gotten by his defender most of the time. Right. He's still having to shoot over somebody. He's good at making that shot, but that's a tough shot for a 10 to 12 footer in the lane when you're still shooting over a defender. Jimmy Boeheim, very unorthodox, clever, can get his moves in the paint, but he's still always shooting over somebody. So, you don't get that breakdown artist, we've seen guys in the past, Michael Carter-Williams, Johnny Flynn, even like a Scoop Jardine, guys who could take their guy off the dribble and create for both themselves and for others. And so I think the teams lack that. And, they've still shown they can put points on the board. That's been fun. They've beat Wake Forest, which is having a great year. They had Miami beat down there. I know they didn't finish it off, but Miami's another top 5 team in the league, and you had them beat on their home court. You had Wake beat on their home court. You did beat them here. So it's a team that on a given night can play with pretty much anybody. They've been in a lot of their games. There's only been a couple where they got blown out. So they're close. They're right there. But unfortunately, I think, especially a couple of those bad early losses to Georgetown and Colgate, coupled with a really difficult non-conference schedule where you lose 2 in the Bahamas. Villanova is a tough matchup. I mean, so you really had a tough go of it early on. And then by the time you really figured some things out, now you're into the heart of the ACC, and it's just tough to win, and catch up when you're making up for that hole you dug yourself back in November, December.
We'll get into some stuff with Frank and Jesse Edwards in just a second. But first, it's that time of the year where everyone's pretty much given up on all of their New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to it. Tim's sticking to it because we have Built Bar in our life. It's almost like you're not really making a resolution because they're so enjoyable and tasty. Have you ever tried the Puffs too? They're the best of the Built Bars in my opinion as well. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, and they're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're covered in 100% chocolate. Whether you like the yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, all of them so good, they're bound to be your new favorites. So go to Built.com, scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away by the specs, the stats on these two. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar where you're hovering around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste, and they make it taste delicious first. Then they figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how they pull it off, but they do every single time. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, it maybe wasn't the best year for that non-conference schedule that they had, or as tough as it was in the non-conference slate. Last game, we see Frank Anselem at starting center because Jesse Edwards is out. He has 15 rebounds, plays pretty well, stays out of foul trouble for the most part. Were you surprised at all about how effective Frank was being thrusted into that starting center role?
A little bit. Yeah, I mean, 15 rebounds is a heck of a lot of rebounds. I mean, you got to go back 2 full seasons to find Barama Sidibe getting 15 against North Carolina in the 20 season. That's the last time a Syracuse center had as many as 15 boards. I mean, he did a great job, mostly on the defensive boards. The key was he stayed out of foul trouble, as you mentioned, and that's what really surprised me. He can play a little defense. He can rebound for you, which he did, but you figured a young center in his first start going up against a Keve Aluma, he's going to get into foul trouble. Aluma's going to be an issue. He's going to be, trying to recover because of the way Virginia Tech moves the ball. He'll be out of position once or twice and get one of those fouls where he's, trying to get back into position like all young centers do. And, you can go back in history. I mean, Atan Thomas, is one of the greatest centers in Syracuse history. But I'm here to remind people, as a freshman, Atan couldn't get off his warm-up jacket without committing a foul for a while. I mean, he would get in foul trouble. Craig Forth got into foul trouble as a freshman. When Craig was a sophomore, they went to the title game. When he was a freshman, they were lucky you had Jeremy McNeil around to take up some minutes. Daryl Watkins got into foul trouble. They all do. Fab Mello as a freshman. So for Frank, I think he played 37 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Listen, that is the biggest thing they're going to want out of Frank going forward. 15 rebounds is gravy. If he can just stay out of foul trouble and stay on the floor, because if not, then you got to go to, a hobbled Barama Sidibe and hope he can give you minutes, or then you're going small. And, Frank's going to have some difficult matchups coming up with, Duke and Mark Williams comes to the Dome. Of course, it's not just Mark Williams. It's Theo John and Paulo Banchero and a lot of big guys. North Carolina, you got to go to Chapel Hill, and, they got Armando Bacot, who's 6'11", 260, 80 pounds. I don't
Leading
know.
the conference and
Double-double
rebounds.
every game.
Yep.
Every
He's
time
a
you
tough
check his
one,
stats,
right?
it's crazy.
Good luck staying out of foul trouble when he's your assignment. So, but the next couple games maybe gives Frank a chance to kind of continue to get his feet wet and, get comfortable out there. Boston College and Georgia Tech, neither one have a real dominant big man. So, the job one, stay out of foul trouble and stay on the floor. And then job two, I guess, would be keep your fingers crossed that Barama can give him some minutes.
Yeah. So something that people have brought up with Frank now that he went out there and had success in that first game, especially by standards that were maybe set for him in that first game and the first start that he had, people want to know what a Jesse and Frank lineup would have looked like with Frank at the 4, Jesse at the 5. Tim and I internally make the same face that you just made for anyone watching on YouTube. We are in the camp that it wouldn't work. It's something you get too jumbled in the paint. It probably takes away from a lot of what Jesse's success would have been this year offensively. I don't see it working. However, if one of those two could develop an 18-footer, maybe that changes the conversation a little bit. But what exactly are your thoughts on a potential Frank and Jesse lineup being out there as the 4 and the 5? Because in this era of college basketball that we live in, I think Frank's going to go out there and probably show that, and to no fault of his own, because Jesse's had the season that he's had, but he probably can start somewhere else if he wants to. And in the transfer portal era, he could go and find another place to play if he wanted to. And at a certain point, he's going to need to get his minutes. So what are your thoughts on a Jesse and Frank 4-5 lineup?
Well, it can't work this season, and it couldn't have, even when Jesse was healthy. As you alluded to, they're basically the same sort of guy. Jesse's a little bit more advanced offensively. Frank's not. Jesse's scoring 12 points a game, but, you look at where he's taking the bulk of his shots. They're all around the rim. They're dunks, they're layups, they're tip-ins. Every once in a while, he might fire off a 12 to 15 footer, but when he takes it, listen, even the most ardent Syracuse fan is hoping it goes in, not expecting it to. Frank doesn't take any of those shots. So when Jesse's running those pick and rolls with Joe and Buddy in recent games before his injury, and that pick and roll was working so well, the North Carolina State game stands out where that pick and roll was just so successful. It never works if Frank's on the floor, because Frank's defender would be waiting right there in the paint near the basket, because Frank could go stand in the corner and his man's not following him. Frank's defender is going to be clogging up that middle. And then vice versa, if you tried to run something for Frank, if Jesse Edwards wants to take a 15-footer, the other team's going to let him. What they're not going to do is they're not going to let Frank, get an open pick and roll, go to the basket shot. He would be met by the other team's 5 and probably not get very far. So it just wouldn't have worked this year. And can it work in the future? Well, it all depends on one or both of those guys expanding their game and really developing a shot, further from the basket that would force teams to keep their defender out there. Like the team right now that Jesse was playing on, no one could leave Joe. You leave Joe open, he's going to make the 3. Same with Buddy, same with Cole, and even Jimmy Boeheim, you leave him open. So that's why they spread that floor, and they just let Jesse just set that screen and roll quick. And once Jesse learned how to roll to the basket, that's when it really worked. For a little while, Jesse would set that screen, turn, pause, wait. What am I supposed to do? Oh, that's right, I'm rolling to the basket. And by then, defenders they've done their job hedging. they've stopped the guard on the roll. The guards man catches up, and now the five's back in position, and Jesse can't roll to the basket, or at least as he tries to, his defenders between him and the basket. But man, once he figured that out, that was a deadly combination there, him and Joe or him and Buddy. But no, it's going to take some time. I haven't even seen warm-ups where I see Frank taking anything beyond a 12 to 15 footer. That's going to be heavy off-season work for him to develop that. I certainly hope he doesn't leave. Obviously, I think it's helped Syracuse next season to have a two-headed monster in the middle. And I think Frank, maybe, he doesn't start because Jesse's in front of him, but I think he can expand his minutes as Jim Boeheim gains more and more trust in him. And he has a golden opportunity here over the last month or so of the season to show what he can do and to really set himself up for next season now. But you're right. You mentioned the portal. Guys don't have to sit out anymore. Could there be somebody trying to tempt him to leave? Absolutely. But, from what I hear, when I gather, Frank really likes it here. He likes it at Syracuse. He likes the program. He gets along with all his teammates. Does he really want to disrupt that? Because, eventually Frank will get his time here. And it might actually work out for him because you really don't want to step in and have your time come before you're ready. Mm-hmm. So if you really want to be starting right now and you're in foul trouble all the time and have everybody see your negatives. So we'll see what he does in this day and age, man. I'm still kind of getting caught up to the portal age. It's hard to really retrain your brain. No, he's not going to leave. He'd have to sit out 1 year and then he'll be gone. And then, whatever. So who knows?
We'll dive into some Benny Williams stuff in just a second, but hey, football might be over, but basketball is in full swing for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the #1 spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the final days of Olympic coverage and information as well. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up and learn about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Well, what about with Benny Williams? Because I feel like, in a different era, there's been so many freshmen like this that have come in, high expectations. They've struggled. And then their sophomore year, you can go down a list of 5 or 10 at Syracuse that really exploded and had great sophomore years. But now the concern becomes, because we are in that transfer portal era, is he going to stay for that sophomore year? What are your thoughts on just long-term, if he were to come back at Syracuse, could he be one of those guys that takes a leap next year?
I tell you what, if I'm Benny Williams and I think I'm good, or if I think I'm going to be a good basketball player, I wouldn't leave Syracuse right now. I mean, the reason you're not playing right now is you're not ready. This shot still needs a lot of work. It's been tough. I sympathize with guys coming off the bench and trying to get things done in limited minutes. I really do. It's really hard when you're out there for a limited amount of time, even if you do everything right, because eventually Cole Swider's coming back in, right? There's only so long the starter will stay on the bench, but it gets worse when you think, if I make a mistake or two, I'm looking over my shoulder thinking, I'm going to get yanked because coach just doesn't quite trust me yet the same way he does the starters. And that happens, and that's hard. So I sympathize with them. But if you think you're going to be good and you think you're going to develop into that type of player, Syracuse's system is the perfect system for that type of forward. And you can go somewhere else and they, other places can help you out and they'll play you or whatever. But, you don't want to be, going somewhere else and finding out you're not quite ready there either. I would want to continue my development in the program that wanted me. And God, man, with his athleticism, I think eventually when he gets time on the floor and maybe another offseason, he's going to be a great defender. I think he can be great in the zone. I mean, the offside, the weak side help block shots could be off the charts. When I see him do some of those blocks off the weak side, it reminds me of Wes Johnson back in 2010. Mm-hmm. And, what a weapon on defense. He's got to improve offensively too. There's got to be a lot of work done in the offseason on that shot and his offensive confidence as well. But that can happen here as well as anywhere else. I mean, right now you look at it, Jimmy Boeheim's, unless he applies for and gets a waiver from the NCAA, he's done. This is his last year. Cole Swider theoretically could come back, but he's indicated coming into the season it would be his last. So there's at least one, if not two, starting forward jobs available. I mean, I always hear these young guys talk about betting on themselves, right? That's why they go pro early. I'm betting on myself. I first heard it when Deion Waiters said it, right? Betting on himself.
Surprise to no one.
So bet on yourself. Come back to Syracuse. It almost seems like it's not betting on yourself because you're not really taking a leap, right? But in a sense, you are. You're saying, you know what? I am good enough. I'm going to make it. I'm good enough to play at Syracuse in the ACC level. So we'll see. I have a lot of optimism for Benny's future. I really do, because I see a kid that's still working hard, a very upbeat, positive attitude. Those are all good signs, at least from the outside looking in.
Yeah, you bring up the character of the kid. I mean, it is off the charts from what you see. It is, and yeah, exactly. There are a lot of kids, especially ones who were rated as highly as he would, who probably would have entered the portal by now. We've seen it happen, right? Guys check out around Christmas break sometimes. It happens. But for him to still give it all he's got, and you hear guys like Cole talk about him, and Cole's been around. I mean, there's a somewhat similar situation he was around when he was at Villanova as a freshman with Javon Quinterly. And he goes out and is posting stuff on social media about, this was my second school for a reason, my second choice for a reason. It shows the character of the kid. And I think that's a very important thing that you brought up there. But for you, why do you think it hasn't clicked? Because you think about some guys who maybe weren't in his exact position per se, but we've seen it click for freshmen, whether it's someone like O'Shea Brissett, who was a starter as a freshman. Marek was playing his best basketball at the end of his freshman season. Even you want to go back recently, Bryson Goodine, he got a game-winning tip-in a game to win a basketball
game. It didn't really
game.
click for him, though, right? I mean,
it didn't really click per se, but
he had a moment.
He had a moment, but we haven't really seen Benny have the moments per se this year. Occasionally he has the splash, but just to be in at the end of a game too, I think is something that we haven't really seen a whole heck of a lot about of Benny. Why hasn't it clicked for him this year?
Well, you mentioned O'Shea. O'Shea started from day one. I think also he was a little bit more accomplished and more developed, especially with his shot. But he was starting from day one. And so you get a chance to be out there, play through mistakes, gain confidence. Marek, he had an opportunity come along where he was getting a lot of minutes off the bench and basically started out playing the guy ahead of him. Matthew Moyer was in his redshirt freshman year. It's not like Marek didn't have a Jimmy Boeheim in his 6th year of college or a Cole Swider in his 4th or 5th year ahead of him. He had a redshirt freshman, Matthew Moyer, ahead of him. And then he starts out playing, and then Matthew also got an injury, and Marek was ready for his opportunity. Marek also was in a very limited role if we go all the way back to his freshman year. He had guys like Tyus Battle and O'Shea Brissett, and was Elisha Hughes that year or no?
I think he was a redshirt that
Howard.
year. Yeah.
Frank Howard.
Yep.
Yeah. So you had a lot of other guys taking care of it. And also that was a very defensive-oriented team. Marek could play defense. That's all he was asked to do. That team was winning games 65-63. So, with Benny this year, I think it goes back. I don't think offensively and with his shot, he was really ready to give him big minutes. Because if you're out there in that role, you have to be able to knock down a shot. Especially when you have veterans like Cole and Jimmy that are going to be in your starting lineup and getting the minutes. And, again, it's really, really hard to play in limited time. The guys I've seen do the best in that limited time off the bench are always older guys. They're comfortable in the role. They're able to handle it. Or if it's a younger kid, it's a kid who is being asked only to do a couple little things. Benny's best moments are when he hasn't worried so much about the offense and just plays defense and rebounds. And when he gets pulled, more often than not, it's when he blows a defensive assignment or is out of position somewhere on defense, right? Or like the other day on an inbounds play. He doesn't get pulled for almost anything offensively. because they're not expecting him to do that. So again, I think he's just making some mistakes because of inexperience, not a chance to stay out there for a little bit and get into a rhythm. And I can't tell you what these guys go through who are the really great ones that start and play all the time. My limited high school experience was a guy who came off the bench. And I sympathize with guys who come off the bench. Maybe this is just a big excuse for me on my part why I wasn't any good in high school, because I was saying it was really hard to do anything in 2 minutes time. Right. But it's true. I mean, it's really hard. And I think it's hard for a freshman. I think I see him pressing a lot. I just think he needs the time of an off season to work on things and work with coaches and get better. And, off season, you get stronger in the weight room. You're going to get more confident. You play a little bit better in pickup games. You get more confident. It's the stuff we heard about Jesse Edwards all last season, So, and we got to remind ourselves, Jesse's a junior this year.
Right.
We'll see where Benny can be as a sophomore. We've seen it. You guys mentioned it. Michael Carter-Williams, guys, he hardly saw the floor as a freshman. He had Brandon Trish and Scoop Jardine ahead of him. So, that wasn't going to happen. He had Deion Waiters on that team. So but second year, Michael Carter-Williams is so good as a sophomore, at least for the NBA. So we've seen this happen. And there's guys on this coaching staff who can talk to Benny. Demetrius Nichols, who's, their grad assistant right now, he didn't play a whole hell of a lot as a freshman. But look at what he became in his especially both his upper class years. Alan Griffin was a starter as a sophomore, got benched as a junior, was coming off the bench, limited minutes, awful year. If there was a portal back then, Alan probably's gone. But instead, he sticks around and is like full-time starter, leader of the team as a senior. So it's to Benny's benefit that he's around guys. And it's kind of funny. You think of Demetrius Nichols as the guy who was like one of the best three-point shooters in Syracuse history. And I think he's top 20 or top 25 on the all-time scoring list. But you forget, he struggled too. So Demetrius and Alan can talk to Benny about that struggle and how they work through it. So we'll see. You keep your fingers crossed that he's willing to put in a lot of work in the offseason.
All right, our thanks to Mike Waters. He'll be back tomorrow. We'll get into some recruiting stuff for the class of 2022. What is this class going to look like? Can they turn things around overnight for Syracuse and get this team back into the tournament next year? Also, he's got some great Jim Boeheim stories, just some great stories from his time on the beat. And that's what happens when you have 30-plus years on the same beat. So he will get into some of his favorite stories from his Hall of Fame career tomorrow as well. So for Tim, I'm Tyler. We'll talk with Mike Waters again tomorrow.